Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe Corallo. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm all right, Perch. How are you?
I'm doing great, and we're here with Joe Casey. Joe Casey, welcome back. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how's life been treating you? You've been hanging in there. Everything's going well for you?
Good and busy, just keep on keeping on.
Busy is good. Yeah, and especially now you're enjoying paying what is it out there? You're out on the West Coast. You're paying like $12 a gallon for gas. Is that?
Yeah, I just don't go anywhere. It's
That's
just
perfect.
too expensive to drive anywhere.
That's the solution. You're helping the environment by staying
That's
home.
right. That's right.
There you go.
Very, very good. Well, I'm always excited to talk to you, and there's always a lot of things to go over, and definitely somewhere in this, we do want to ask you about if you watched the Doctor Strange 2 and saw the big screen debut of America Chavez, a character you created.
I did see it. I saw a bootleg copy I ripped from the internet.
Oh no. This took a turn. Cool. But before we get to any of that, so this is like the tease. We want to talk. You've got another project out, and this is a project I think that will be near and dear to the hearts of a lot of listeners here who remember kind of this era very fondly. What do you have going on?
Well, Image Comics is doing a 30th anniversary anthology series that is out as we speak. I think the first 2 issues are out at this point, maybe 3.
Mm-hmm.
And starting in issue 5, I'm doing a 3-part series starring the old Team Youngblood character Dutch with artist Nathan Fox, and we're very excited about it.
That's awesome. And it's 3. So it's a 3-part series, 3-part story.
Yes.
In this Image anniversary. So why Dutch? Where I think a lot of people, you said Team Youngblood. There was a toy. They made toys of Dutch.
Oh yeah, he was legit. He was definitely legit. So okay, I'll give you the quick backstory because there's a few reasons why Dutch.
Yeah.
The first is sort of a personal one, which is my first professional comic sale as a writer to Eric Stevenson, ironically, was a Dutch story that was intended for that Youngblood Strike File book that they were doing.
Oh, nice.
Right.
And
Nice.
it never got published, but that was my first sale. So there's kind of a full circle aspect to doing this story now, for their anniversary issue.
I love
The
that.
other reason is I wanted to, Eric asked me to do something for the book. He started off asking me if I wanted to take one of my own characters that I've done before and do another story with them. But I realized after hearing what else was going on in this Image anthology that I wanted to do something that tied directly to the history of the company, which no one else in the anthology, as far as I know, seem to be doing. They're doing their own thing, which is cool. That's what Image is all about.
Yeah.
But I wanted to take a character from the early 90s and do kind of a where are they now type of story in real time.
That's awesome.
Which means that if the original if the character's original adventures took place in 1992, then what would that character be doing in 2022?
Nice.
So 30 years passed. And so the reason so here's the final reason it's Dutch. I mean, obviously, it would have been cool to use another, more recognizable Youngblood character. I've written those characters in the past.
Yeah.
But the current situation with the rights to those characters is a bit murky. They're not really available to use by anyone, not even Rob Liefeld, apparently, to my understanding. But Rob didn't create Dutch. Chap Yape created Dutch. And Chap still owns Dutch.
Yeah.
So we were able to go to Chap and say, can we do this, and get his blessing. He works in the animation industry now. So he's actually worked on Ben 10 before.
Nice.
So we were able to go to Chap and ask for his permission and get his blessing, and he graciously gave it to us. And so he's, we send him everything that we're doing, and he's really excited about it. He didn't think anybody cared.
Yeah.
But I think people do care. I'm kind of betting on people remembering the character and being interested in, what he's up to now.
Yeah, so many pieces that are awesome. So I like that, people are going back in the past and taking some of these characters, obviously the 90s and the entire Image revolution and everything else. There was a lot of attention behind it, but really not too much has been done with the characters recently. and as you say, it's tied up in this rights issue and everything else. So, but you were able to find kind of a loophole to grab this guy who you've worked with in the past with Ben 10, bring the character back to the forefront. Now, does Chap get any kind of money off any of this by any chance, or is that?
I don't know how that's between him and Image. I think, you know, it depends on how the book sells, I suppose.
Yeah.
I would assume he might get some sort of creator royalty if, you know, as a piece of it. I hope so, you know. But that's, you know, luckily that's not my area in this endeavor.
Well, we could cross fingers to hope for that, but I do like the reaching out to old buddy, finding a way around this. You said murky. That's one way to describe this situation. I've heard more colorful words used to describe where the rights of Rob's characters wound up. But no, we don't need to get into that. But then this reclaiming of this character and find out where he's been since. And so tell me more about that. Where is he at his life? It's time has passed. How much can you tell us about kind of the thrust of the story?
Well, he's 30 years older, so that would put him probably in his, you know, mid to late 50s. I mean, I kind of looked at this as sort of the Gran Torino of superhero stories.
Awesome. Okay.
Anybody who's familiar with that movie, it's kind of a get off my lawn kind of movie. And it's the same thing here, where we're in a situation where the past, he thought he'd left it behind, and the past will inevitably come back to haunt him. It's one of those things that it is continuity based, even though we don't have direct access to that continuity. But if anyone out there has read the first 3 or 4 issues of Team Youngblood, which were written by Eric Stevenson, drawn by Chap, this is in a way a 30 years later sequel to that specific story.
Awesome. And so it's a good gift, and it goes to the Image anniversary. That was well, from my standpoint, I'm glad you said that was kind of the point. I was hoping actually for more stories, and nothing against the people who've done the stories in the book. There's been some really good ones in there, but I was looking for something that connected back to the original in some kind of fun and creative way. It sounds like you've done it here.
Well, somebody had to do it. I mean, 30 years is quite an achievement for a publishing company that, you know, started in 1992. Yeah. A lot of the other ones that were around then are not around anymore.
Yeah.
So it should definitely be celebrated, but narratively, it was, the challenge wasn't the story itself, because, you know, an aged superhero kind of being pulled back into another adventure, that's a time-worn trope. You know, we've seen that a million times. But the interesting thing about it was, how do we address the issue of what is the old continuity now that a major component of it is not accessible? I mean, we couldn't even show the original team in flashbacks.
Right.
Yeah.
So we found a way around that, which we're very excited about, which is that there was a series of stories that, you know, Chap, let's put it this way. Chap wasn't the only one that created characters back in the day that they owned. Eric Stevenson created quite a few, actually. Okay. So we were able to go through that list of characters, some of whom are so obscure, it's unbelievable. And now you guys have seen the first story. There's a one-panel flashback where it's got that the team that Dutch belonged to that is Youngblood but isn't Youngblood.
Yeah.
And those characters are all legit characters from back in the day. I mean, you have to be a real Image head, and especially Extreme Studios, to know any of them. They are real. And that way won't, I put it this way. Eric and I are very excited. This will not be the only time you see those characters. Now that we've kind of figured out the continuity of a, you know, okay, I mean, this is let's get real fanboy here.
Let's do it.
One of the inspirations for this thing that we're doing, I'm a big fan of the Legion of Superheroes 5 years later.
Same here.
I just got the second volume omnibus today.
There you go. There you go.
Right next to me. Yeah.
So you guys are familiar with this run. Now, I mean, I'm a big Keith Giffen fan. Love his stuff. Love the Bierbaum's work. You know, everything about that book was great. But the thing that I really loved was, people who know that run know that in issue 4, they were forced to alter their own timeline to extract all of the Superman lore out of it. Now, for the Legion of Superheroes, that's a major component of their history.
Yep.
I mean, they first appeared in Superboy's comic. So to extract that stuff was a big hurdle. And as we've all know who read the book, they replaced Superboy with Valor and Supergirl with a character named Laurel Gann. And it was the creative team did it in certain areas, but it was also up to the reader to kind of fill in the gaps, to kind of go, okay, so we've got Laurel Gann now. So now we've got to, in our minds, replace Supergirl in all those old stories with Laurel Gann. We've got to replace Superboy in our minds with Valor and all those old stories.
Yep.
I was a big fan of that. I thought as a budding writer, when I was just a wee lad when those came out, I just thought that was such a great approach and just so interesting. So when we came to this story, it was kind of the same kind of thing. So in that first story, the flashback panel with this new team, which is supposedly the old team, is a riff on the first issue cover of Team Youngblood. We use the same layout, it's got the same background, but it's replacing characters with different characters.
Yep.
So this story is really for the Image/Extreme Studios diehards, the ones that really remember that stuff, the Robert Kirkmans of the world, shall we say.
So how did you get connected with the creative team, Nathan Fox and all of that? Like, how did the rest of the team come together?
Well, I mean, I've worked with Nathan Fox on a couple of things. We created Zodiac together, which who's been in Moon Knight recently. We did a run on McFarlane's Haunt book. We did a Captain Victory book for Dynamite. So he's game. Whenever I call him up with some wacky scheme, he didn't really know Dutch. He doesn't know a lot about that old early 90s Image stuff. So for him, it was kind of like, I sent him a reference of the original character, and he was like, okay.
I love it.
I'm like, come on, man. And it's funny because I feel like Nathan's style, and again, you guys have seen the first chapter, his style is sort of it's connected to the spirit of that old Image art in its kind of energy. It's obviously a different style, but the energy to me matches up. So it's been a blast to see him do this kind of testosterone-fueled action comic. I mean, I usually put him through his paces when it comes to action when we've worked together, but this is on another level.
Yeah.
No, the art looks great. I mean, Nathan is it's and the colorist. So who do you have for colorist? Francesco?
Yes, he is kind of a new guy on the scene. We were lucky enough to get him early on in his career, and he's knocking it out of the park too. Nathan's a real art snob, as you can imagine. He teaches at SVA, and I mean he wants the best that he can get. So to find a new guy that passed up with Nathan was a big deal. I was thrilled because I thought he was great, and so I mean it looks amazing.
It goes together really, really well, and it sets this tone. Using Gran Torino kind of example, but it's I like the shift between night and day, or I guess it starts out day, goes to night. The coloring looks really, really wonderful here, and it doesn't feel like that. A lot of the digital coloring work now feels hacky. It looks like they're using tricks, and this looks very organic, very natural. The whole thing looks beautiful.
Yeah, because it was a sort of a desert vibe. We were kind of going. Me personally, I was giving him a lot of Lieutenant Blueberry reference. because I just that to me is the best Western that's ever been done in comics.
That's so we should mention that again. So a lot of people, Mobius, sorry, is not as well known as he should be.
No, if that's the case, that's horrible. And I mean, the Lieutenant Blueberry stuff maybe even less so because he went under Jean Giraud as his nom de plume for that work. So people don't even know that is Mobius in a lot of circles.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great. Kind of hard to get your hands on that book, I think. Or maybe they've put it out recently, but I remember for a long period of time it was very hard to get.
Yeah, that's definitely an eBay find.
Yeah, that's one of the best comics we could recommend today. But okay, so back to this book. So this is you've got a really good bit of, and I don't want to say nostalgia exactly because it doesn't feel that way. You are definitely tapping into kind of a character remembered from the 90s and all these other elements, but it doesn't feel like it's a cheap kind of just you run through the paces like you see from a lot of nostalgia titles. This is doing something new with the character.
I hope so. I mean, I don't think I would have done it if we didn't have a take on it that felt like it fit. And I think, again, setting it in real time, hopefully it'll connect with those guys, the readers who were kids when the Image comics first came out, Yeah. I mean, I have a theory that the last generation of kids who read mainstream comics were the first Image generation.
Yeah, I would think so.
They were 12, 13, 14 years old when Image happened, maybe even younger than that. But to me, that was the last generational, these are the kids reading comics. Now it's a lot more fractured. I don't think there's been a sizable generation of young readers since then. But a lot of them hopefully are still out there and will get a kick out of seeing something like this.
They've aged, like you said, they've aged with the characters. Now they're also sitting on a chair wanting people to get off their lawn.
That's right.
Take that, 90s comics fans. There you go. Yeah. I think it's awesome that you're doing it. Now you teased us a little bit, so I don't know if you could say more, but you mentioned this won't be the last time we've seen these characters. Is there more coming?
There is more coming. I mean, once Eric and I kind of figured out how to do this story, we got very excited that, okay, now we can move on from here. And, the thing that people don't know about Eric Stephenson is he's kind of one of us in terms of his background, his fandom, the things he's into. I mean, he and I have been on the phone for hours talking about Jim Shooter,
Yeah.
And he's just into the same kind of stuff. We dissect the era that we grew up in, and we study it, and we wonder what worked that we can use now, and what didn't work that you want to avoid now. And when it came to this area of story and these characters, we got very excited because we were like, wow, we can actually maybe use some of this useless knowledge we've accumulated on how to do, shared universe comics and apply them to something that's contemporary but yet has a past. And the real thing about it kicked in when I realized, when Marvel Comics started in the early 60s, it had only been, 15, 16, 17 years since what now we think of as the golden age. We're 30 years on from the beginning of Image.
Oh yeah.
It's oddly enough, because none of us were alive, in the early 60s, at least none of us on this call.
Yeah.
That seems like a huge amount of time between 1945 and 1961. To me, that seems like forever.
Yeah.
But it's 16 years, and we're talking 30 years. So now Image Comics, if you look at the current continuity, whatever shape it's in, and we may kind of recreating it with this as we go on with this story, Image has its own golden age now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can refer back to and build on and use as a past of a shared universe. And it's for those of us who are into that stuff, it's pretty exciting.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I don't know that I haven't heard that before, but you're right. I think that Image, I mean, people have been describing kind of the different phases of Image's life. And we are, which you're right. We've got a golden age of Image at this point. It's kind of weird to wrap your head around.
Yeah, even when I did a Youngblood series in around 2007, I think.
Yeah.
And even then, I fudged the timeline. I didn't address the fact that it had been at that point 15 years since Youngblood premiered. I just didn't even address it because I wanted that contemporary feel, and I'm super proud of that series. But for this, I realized it had more resonance to allow the time in and to acknowledge that it's been 30 years, you know, and not run away from it.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I like when people go back and reclaim things that have been lost to past or not being used, and they find a way to do something new with it. I think that's the best of both worlds. And so I'm hoping that a lot of the people who continuously come to this channel, I know other channels, and talk about how they miss the 90s and they want the 90s. I mean, in this case, you've brought somebody back from obscurity from the 90s, and there's a comic out, so people hopefully go and buy it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's the best of both worlds, because if it was purely a nostalgia act, that wouldn't interest me at all.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're treating Image continuity as real continuity again. I mean, I know in some of the individual books, I mean, Todd does it in Spawn. Certainly Larson does it in Savage Dragon, where his book is in real time as well. It's different from a shared universe concept, you know. When you're on your own little island and you can do whatever you want, it's great creatively, but something gets lost in that. And I'm sure those guys, at least Larson's an old school comic fan too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure he knows he's made his choice for himself, but that in that choice, something gets missed in the shared universe of it all, you know?
Yeah. You know, to put some of this in perspective too, with what we were saying, we are now just about the same difference from Youngblood #1 to today to Youngblood #1 in Amazing Fantasy 15.
That's right.
Yep. It's within 2 months difference.
Yeah, you're an ass.
But yeah, it's crazy. But when you think about it, like, look at the difference in comics from Amazing Fantasy 15 to Youngblood #1 and Youngblood #1 to today. It does seem like there was a bigger change from 62 to 92 than 92 to today. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that.
I think that's right, but I think it's different when you live through the change.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
When you didn't live through the change. I mean, you know, from Amazing Fantasy 15 to Youngblood #1, the whole process of printing evolved.
Yeah.
You know, in so many ways, took giant leaps. From Youngblood #1 to now, the quality of the material has evolved. Mm-hmm. And things like computer coloring and computer lettering and just the digital revolution happened in the past 30 years. Yeah. But I do think the bigger leap was from Amazing Fantasy to Youngblood #1 in terms of evolutionary leaps.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that you just had so much more world building. I mean, at that point in Amazing Fantasy, you had a relatively small universe. And by the time you got to Youngblood, I'm counting the different DC and Marvel. I mean, you have tens of thousands of characters that had to have been created in that point. And a lot of characters that stuck, that became pretty big headliners. I don't think there's been as many new characters created from Youngblood #1 to today that are mainlining books at this point that are big stars. I mean, there's a few, but I think there was more, not to be Hollywood about, more IP generation during that Amazing Fantasy to Youngblood era.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's kind of depressing to think about too, actually.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, what we're excited about with this story and moving forward from this anthology story is treating the old comics, the early Image comics, as the early Marvels treated the Golden Age, the old timely comics, you know, to be able to cherry pick different things and the most interesting things and bring them into the present day. Again, it's all about resonance. What ideas from the early 90s can still resonate today with readers, even ones that didn't read those old comics. So that's going to be the fun of it and the challenge of it. And hopefully it will feel as fresh as the Marvel Universe did, even to people who read the old timely comics.
Yeah.
You know, the Marvel Universe is a whole new thing, a whole new way of doing comics. So I don't know if I can, you know, I can't claim that level of genius, not by any stretch of the imagination, but that's the benchmark that we're going for. We're trying to evolve it in some fashion.
Yes.
What's the style of the story? So in terms of the theme, is this, I mean, from the pages, is this going to be more science fiction, more horror, more just straight up super? Like, what's the tone you're going for in the story?
It's a good question. I mean, to me, the most interesting thing about it is that it's we're attempting to sort of ground those early comics into some sort of more human reality. You know, when you read the story, it's all told from Dutch's. You know, we're going back to the old trope of narrative captions. It's all Dutch's inner monologue. So you hear him musing on the time passage, how it's been 30 years. Can you transcend your past, or is it always going to haunt you? I mean, it's the things that you think about as you get up there in years. It's not something that they got too deep with in, you know, the first year of Youngblood in '92. You know, it was because everybody was everybody making those comics were as old as the characters they were writing and drawing, pretty much. And now, for me, I'm much closer in age to what Dutch is than I am to, you know, any teenage characters I might write. So I feel I have the life experience and the insight to give this character some gravitas that he wouldn't have if you were just telling an abstract, oh, it's just another Dutch adventure with his big guns and his headset, you know.
I'm curious. So do you find that I mean, how many pages is this story? It's a relatively short story because that's the format of these image books.
It's 24 pages total because it's 3 8-page chapters.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like a one shot in effect.
It's kind of the pilot episode. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay. That's a different. That's an interesting way of putting it. All right.
Yeah.
So can we assume that you're going to be working with Nathan Fox more?
We can assume that, sure.
Lots of assumptions being made.
I feel every time I work with him, it feels like I've never stopped working with Nathan Fox. So
that's well. I think the two of you go really well together. I'm curious to see where it goes. Again, it's a great concept and it's interesting. So, if you don't mind going from here to something more, which will be more off the rails. So, we teased it at the beginning. You said you watched your creation, America Chavez, hit the big screen.
Yes, I did.
So how did they do? How did you feel it worked?
They did fine. I mean, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, so I can't fault the quality of the movie. He's great. And again, I'm a big fan of these movies, especially the ones that are batshit crazy, like this one was, because this one really, if you look past, over the past, 10 or 12 years of this whole series of MCU movies, the ones that I like still are the ones that feel the most like a comic book.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, they're the ones that kind of get the worst rap. So my favorites are Iron Man 2. I'm a big Iron Man 2 fan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm a big Avengers Age of Ultron fan.
Okay.
Thor Ragnarok, I really dug.
Yeah.
Civil War, I really dug. These are the ones, but to me, they're the ones that felt the most like a Marvel comic book.
Yeah.
And Doctor Strange 2 felt like that, because it just took a lot of disparate elements from the universe, from the continuity, and kind of smashed them together.
So I'm a big Sam Raimi fan. I like his work a lot, and I kept struggling between. I like what he does, and I struggled with him in the MCU. I couldn't put the two together.
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt. I can't make up my mind on how I feel about that movie. There were parts of it I like watching what Sam Raimi did. It definitely felt like a Sam Raimi movie to me. It didn't feel like an MC movie. I mean, you could see Raimi through the movie.
Yeah.
But it also felt like Marvel. I think it's that Marvel is connecting this into their whole universe, and they've got a lot of other movies that are going to tap into it and everything else. And those two, like, this is where I wish there was less connection between all the movies in the MCU. I think I like it better as a standalone film.
Yeah, like, for me, one of my biggest problems with the movie probably was how they used America Chavez, because she was kind of like a MacGuffin.
Totally.
She was the plot device, and it's like I would have rather, like, just have Doctor Strange and Wong jumping around to different parallel universes and running into stuff. I think that actor that plays Wong is great.
Yeah.
So, like, just do that. But it seemed like they were just adding extra stuff.
I do think, in Sam Raimi's defense, I think America Chavez was the biggest element that was foisted upon him by
Sure.
the Marvel Studios. And it's funny because in print, America Chavez is a great name. When you say it in dialogue, it's a little confusing. We have to save America. What's going on with America? How's America? Bizarre to hear it out loud.
Yeah, it is. But I actually, funny story. So I'm working with Brad Simpson on something, and he also got to see the movie, and he also enjoyed it. We chatted about it briefly. So since he colored on that, I think
he did. Yeah. Those guys did go to the premiere. I was busy that night, so I. I know. Woe is me.
Damn it. But how do you? I mean, if it was a very different America Chavez than your version, though.
Yes, I would agree with that. Different than any version, probably.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. It was a Disney Junior version.
Yeah, and if that's what they're setting her up for, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, make that TV show. I'd love to see that.
It definitely feels like we're getting a Hawkeye, Kate plus America Chavez plus Miss Marvel when she's done. It definitely feels like they're setting up all the teen Disney characters to have a wacky adventure together.
Well, they're leaving their options open, I think.
At the very least, yeah.
Yeah, because they're oddly enough, despite WandaVision and Doctor Strange 2 existing, Wanda's kids were not teed up to be heroes at all in either of those. And no. I think that's bizarre because they're pretty popular as Young Avengers characters.
That comes later. See, that's the plot of the Get Together movie. See, they're all the kids are together, and then there's these two mystery kids, and they're out to avenge their mom's death or something or other, but then they realize their wrongs and they have to fight some dumb villain.
Listen, I'm convinced this multiverse thing is just hanging on by its fingernails. That it is a concept and a thing that is so ready to just run off the rails.
Mm.
Just it's going to take one movie, one TV show to completely confuse the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
They're just right on the precipice of it, I feel like. And I don't think, actually, there was so much lead up to that movie. But if you look at, I don't think there's a multiversal aspect to Thor: Love and Thunder at all. So I think it's something that hopefully they'll use judiciously and not as a crutch to do whatever the hell they want to do,
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, we're going to get another season of Loki, and that's supposed to tap into it. I'm with you. I think that thing gets overused. I think it gets convoluted, gets confusing. It also has that danger of making everyone feel that nothing matters. And then I think people start going, well, wait a minute. Why can't you bring Robert Downey Jr. back? I know you killed him, but there's a multiverse. Just bring him back. Give him money. And I mean, that's not the way it's going to work. So I think it has this potential to both confuse the audience and also set expectations that there's no way Disney's going to be able to handle.
Yeah. It's the movie Doctor Strange, by the way, has a real downer of an ending.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And then and the thing that I didn't understand, I mean, this is really this feels like probably another YouTube channel, but the movie's ending. He's walking outside down the sidewalk. Suddenly he collapses in the street and his third eye blows out of his head.
Yeah.
Then it cuts to credits. Then there's the mid-credit scene, and he's again walking down the street, like, just whistling a tune. And then there's, Charlize Theron saying, "Hey, we got to do this." And he's like, "I'm ready." And the eye pops out. Well, what was the first ending all about? I was totally confused. And I'm usually pretty good at not being confused by movies, especially Marvel movies. Narratively, I had no idea what the hell happened.
I don't think that after credit scene with Charlize Theron was. I don't think that was directed by Sam Raimi. I think that was the MCU conglomerate teeing up a future film or whatever they're going to do. And so it's like Sam Raimi had the catch ending of like, now problems are going to occur. It's that kind of horror twist ending.
Well, either that or the Doctor Strange that we saw in the mid-credit scene was not the Doctor Strange that headlined the movie.
Yeah, that could be.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, that's subtle. If that's the case, that's fucking subtle.
That's
although not that subtle, because it makes up for the fact that it ends on a weird note. Yeah, maybe. Listen, I'd only had that thought 2 seconds ago, so
that's the best kind of thoughts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You have them and then you say them. Those are the best kind of thoughts.
That's exactly right. No filter, just whatever comes to your mind, you say. That works out well for everybody.
Yeah, especially me.
So what other we talked about Dutch, but you have some other comic stuff you can talk about. Do you have other comic stuff you can talk about?
Well, I have other comic stuff, but nothing I can talk about.
Damn it. Okay. But you have a number of other projects coming up. Is stuff that we should be excited about. Just without knowing what it is, we should be excited.
Yes, I have to say I've been experiencing the longest lead times of my career in just the past couple of years. I've been writing like a bastard, but it's just taking forever to come out.
Yeah.
In fact, I have things that I am literally. I can say this: I'm 18 scripts deep on something.
Oh wow!
That has not been scheduled yet.
Oh wow!
That's terrifying. How do you? Yeah. Okay. How do you sleep at night?
Well, no, I mean it's not. I've been doing it over the past 2 years. I mean, I've just been writing regularly. I'm just saying that's how long of a lead time it is. I've had this long to bank scripts on this particular project, and by the time it comes out, I'll be 2 years in.
Yeah,
I'll be 2 years in on scripts.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also just trying to wrap my head around a comic lasting 18 issues.
Yeah.
Well, when it's announced, you'll understand. It's not your typical. It's not the short-sightedness of the big two. It's not a big two comic.
Okay.
That's yeah. Now that
makes a lot more sense already. Yeah.
But how about for people who are listening who maybe some of them aren't as familiar with your work or want to know like what you personally are like, if you got to read one Joe Casey comic, it's this comic, to give people something to pick up.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. I mean, oh God.
Where do people begin?
Can edit this pregnant pause out.
Sure.
I would say, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll give you two things that might be relevant to future projects. Okay. I did a book with Mike Huddleston called Butcher Baker, the Righteous Maker.
Nice.
Which is an Image comic, and it's out in trade, and it's one of my favorite things that I've done. That reading that might be relevant in the next year. Then I did a book with a great artist named Ian McEwan called 1975, which is out in trade. It came out a couple years ago. So that's something else that might point to something that may be revisited in the future.
Okay, that's intriguing. All right, we'll have to point people to that.
Yeah.
I'll ask some more uncomfortable question. So what's something people should absolutely avoid? It's fair to say nothing.
You know what? There might be something. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now with all my collected work and seeing if there's anything. Looking at all the Marvel stuff that I've done. I'll tell you, okay, here's one. This is not, I mean, it's shown up in a couple of different collections. I did a Wolverine one-shot way back in the day called Wolverine Black Rio. And it was drawn very well by a great artist at the time, Oscar Jimenez.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a story about Wolverine, you know, visiting some old friend that we just now found out about in Rio and down there for Carnival and all this kind of crap. And the book, when it was a prestige format one shot, when it came out, a couple of pages had been printed out of order and nobody knew.
Oh no.
I barely knew. It was part of an action scene, and just for some reason the printing signature got out of whack and pages got out of order. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think in the reprints, and this has been reprinted in these, they've been putting out these Wolverine collections, probably around the time of the last movie, the Logan movie. They were just putting out random trades with random Wolverine stories, and Black Rio showed up in one of them, and I think the same wrong page order showed up in that as well.
Oof.
So avoid that, folks.
Oh, that's good. That makes me sad. That's more of a. I don't know
well, you know, he also fights a shark in the story, so that might be.
Sadly, you'll have to narrow that one down because he's fought a shark. He fought a shark like a couple months ago with Forge made him an adamantium surfboard.
Oh Jesus! Why didn't I think of that? God damn it!
How does it float? How does this thing float? That makes no sense. Like, wouldn't that sink immediately?
That's a good idea, though. An adamantium surfboard.
Yeah.
Wow.
I heard that hope floats. So
there's the Krakoa X-Men era is for you. You're missing all kinds of good stuff.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. All right.
So there you go. That's one. That Wolverine Black Rio, one to avoid.
We've asked you this before, but any projects now? You have the ones that you can't talk about, but stuff that you'd like to do. Like what do you have a story in mind? And I guess let's see how I ask this question best. You've got something in your head. You'd love it to bring it to life. It's a creator work. I've asked you before if you'd like to work on anything with the big two, and I remember you saying no, that you really kind of want to push your own stuff. But,
well, it was not, if I recall, I didn't want to say because I wanted to actually, I didn't want to, I was trying to, there's some things that are in the works.
Yes.
I didn't want to jinx by saying, hey, I'd like to do this when I knew I would be pitching them,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's a better, that's more accurate. But in terms of things you have in your head, are there stories that you'd really love to tell and you just don't, and you don't know that you're ever going to get out, that it's maybe too complicated. You can't figure out the right hook. And I ask this because people write in on a regular basis saying we've got these wonderful stories, but they have no concept of how they ever bring it out to comics. And they've asked, do the professional writers ever feel the same, that they've got this amazing story, but they just never can tell it? Does that relate to you at all?
Well, yeah. There's been a couple things. I mean, I go a little further with these things. I've had, whole issues of things drawn, and then I realized not that I didn't want to do it, but I didn't have quite the handle on it that I wanted to have on it going forward. So I've set certain things aside, and then artists get booked up, and then they just kind of fall by the wayside because you never can get back to them because you lose the momentum of the creative process that you might have with a particular artist or whoever. So there's been a couple of those. One of the things that will hopefully, I think, be coming out next year, I can say it's my next Image comic, creator owned, and it's a heavy mother. And it took me quite a long time to write it just because it was, it's still comics. I don't want to say it was emotionally taxing, but it dealt with heavier subjects. It was one of my most, for me, it was one of the more serious things I've written in terms of content and gravitas and sort of, again, going back to resonance. I mean, it really had some for me personally. and I just finished it, writing it a couple of weeks ago, and it'll be out, hopefully it'll be out next year, but it's going to be a while before I want to get back to something that's that draining. That's why the Dutch thing, what will hopefully come from that, is like a palate cleanser from something really heavy. This stuff is, even though it deals in a way with, still some, genuine human themes, it's still about a guy who used to be, half cybernetic, mercenary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he had a very 90s costume. I mean, one of the most 90s of 90s costumes there is.
Very, very. And that, that's with hindsight being what it is, that's one of the best things about him now,
Yeah. I mentioned before, and as we were going through this video, hopefully I know there are people who just listen to the audio, they don't look at the screen. What issue of is this coming out in?
I'm glad you asked, so I don't forget to say. It's coming out in the 5th issue of this anthology series, which comes out in August. So it runs from issue 5 through 6 through 7.
Excellent. So 3 straight issues coming out in August. And this anthology series is out now. And the first couple issues have been great. So many short stories have been really nice in there.
Yeah, there's really cool stuff in this book. And one of the reasons I want to, talk about it is I feel like it's fallen under a lot of people's radar.
It has,
but it's a quality package from the beginning to now. I mean, I think the whole thing is going to be an achievement once they get through the 12 issues. And I'm, happy to contribute in a historical context, because that's what the whole anthology is the reason it exists, is to celebrate that 30th anniversary. So I'm happy to be there for it.
It's a good. I've enjoyed the book so far, and it surprised me. Like I said, I mean, I was expecting. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Something a little bit more marketing driven, and not as. I mean, there's actual substantial work in that book. I think it's a really, really good quality comic that's out in the stands right now.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I mean, this is one of Eric Stevenson's pet projects, and when he wants to see something through, you can tell in the quality of the work. I mean, it's really a good package. The covers have been great. It's just a very, very cool anthology in a time where anthologies are few and far between.
Yeah, and this one doesn't feel like your typical anthology. Like they're putting, I mean, this sounds so cheesy, but they're putting like dividers between the stories where they talk a little bit about what's going on and what's being brought to the table. So it doesn't feel like just a random kind of mishmash of stories that somebody paid cheap dollar for and to cram into a book. Not that I'm referring to anybody's anthology, but it does feel like the stories are thoughtful. And I mean, is there one comment I'd give back to Eric Stevens is like, get more marketing on this. Like it is kind of quietly being released, and it deserves better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
But it's definitely solid. So, okay. So issue number 5 coming out in August, 3 issues in a row. Just wanted to push that on. Joe has a question here.
Yeah, no, I also want to say, like, is there, you do a lot of other things beyond comics, and one might even say that's probably where the bulk of your income comes from. What else can people anticipate coming out from? I know you work with Man of Action. You're part of that. Like, are there things coming down that are people should be keeping their eye out on? Or?
Yeah, there's the Sonic animated series on Netflix, which I think will premiere or debut at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's turning out really, really cool. It's pretty. If you're a fan of the game, this is the show for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I actually got into comics from the Archie Sonic comics because I love the game so much. Yeah. And I used to get up early and either before school or on a Saturday morning before cartoons started, so I could play like Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and stuff like that. So I'm absolutely going to check that out.
Okay, good.
Now I have to ask. So you got this Netflix show Sonic coming out, and I think it's November or something. I think it's November. It's
okay.
I heard. And you said it's about the game, which is good. I'm with Joe. I definitely want to hear that. But is this going to be a bait and switch where when the show comes out, it's actually going to be about Amy Rose?
No, No bait and switch that I know of.
Sorry. It's like all 5 people are slapping their heads right now. Okay.
That's a good deep cut, though. I like that.
Yeah, I do my best.
Yeah, no, that would have been that could have been fun. But but no, this is exciting, and you know, I hope people check it out. I think there are IDW has been doing some pretty good Sonic comics. I think there's probably a bunch of people that listen to this channel who, like, their kids or whatever, listen or read the comics and play the games. So it's all stuff that I think they'd want to check out.
I'm always amazed whenever we talk to Joe, that people come out of the woodwork to talk about their fond memories of Ben 10 and just how much they love those shows. And I mean, myself included, my kids love Ben 10, and they will rewatch those over and over and over. That's
gratifying. And I wish I had any Ben 10 news, but HBO Max, as you can imagine, is kind of in transition. Let's say.
There you go.
They're experiencing some, you know, transitory hiccups. So hopefully when things settle down, they'll realize that they have that IP.
So I think they have to. There was a, and I'm trying to remember where I saw this, but they're doing the analysis on these shows that are on the streaming channels, and in the animated shows that were coming out on HBO Max that of the most viewed, Ben 10 was in the top 10. Which counted the new stuff and the old stuff, just everything in their library. It was right next to South Park for views. And this was last month. So I like I said, they'll get their house in order and they'll definitely, they're definitely going to do more of that. It's doing very well on that platform.
Yeah. I hope so. That I think we'd all benefit from more Ben 10, especially my bank account.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
We want that to happen.
For sure.
Well, I've got kind of one last ask for you. Although it's thank you again for all the time. We love talking with you, and we always learn a lot. Certainly when the Sonic. Well, I would like to do 2 things. When we get to this last issue, so it's coming out in August, or maybe even midway in this thing. Would you come back on again? We can talk about how the story's going so far with Dutch.
Sure, absolutely. And by then I'll be able to tell in more detail where it's going to go from there.
Excellent. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about that. I do. Again, I think there's a big host of people who listen to this channel and a lot of channels who have that kind of fondness for the 90s and no outlet for it. And this is giving you the best of both worlds. So it's tapping into those characters, but it's also evolving them forward.
Well, I would just want those longtime readers to know, or those old readers to know, that if what they missed from those early Image days is that continuity that was established back then.
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to tap into. So for anyone who was invested in that world and that shared universe, hopefully this will be some sort of payoff for whatever nostalgia, whatever remembrance they have of it, because we're taking it real seriously in that regard.
Well, that's awesome. Now, I would love to talk to you again as the series hits the stands, remind people that it's out there, hear about the future plans, and I'd also like to talk to you when the Sonic series drops as well. That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
no, I'd love to. Yeah,
and I definitely need to do a full clickbait kind of video tile talking about how it's all about the girl Sonic character, and he killed off Sonic in the first episode. I'd see how many. I get so many people that get baited by that and respond and clearly never clicked on the video. It's comedy gold for me. Cheap laughs. That's all I go for. Well, okay. One last question for you. So this is so if you know you've seen your share of deconstruction over the years.
I have.
All right. So which character would you pick to deconstruct and ruin?
Well, listen. First of all, who's left?
Yeah. Great answer. There you go.
Do a gritty Dazzler comic.
Yeah.
There you go. Ruin her.
Yeah, there's definitely a Dazzler on drugs comic that hasn't been done yet,
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do a Dazzler Max comic where she's just like a coked out nightmare. And they didn't want to do that.
The way you do that comic is you reveal that she's a performer of some kind, but it's not clear what kind. And you do get the feeling as it goes along that it's not a very glamorous performer job she's got. and she is coked out of her mind. And so it kind of reveals through the course of the book, she has no powers, never was with the X-Men, none of that. This is all just...
Yeah, that's the thing. This is another one of our bad pitches. It's
there you go.
Dazzler's coked out and just like a crazy lunatic, and she was never a mutant, and the X-Men were all in her mind. And
yeah, that entire Australian outback was just her at the Outback Steakhouse passed out
in the bathroom. Yeah, I'd read that comic. I'd read it in a second.
Why not?
Why not? Well,
yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful talking with you, and like I said, I can't wait to talk to you again. And I hope people go and check out the book. It's this Image 30-year anniversary issue number 5 out in August.
Yep. Thanks for having me, guys. It's great talking to you.
Always.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.